Okay, and we are now live for Techie Tuesdays. I hope everyone can see me. There we go, I can see my feed now. Alright, well, we'll just leave this for a few seconds and let everyone join. If you're watching this pre-recorded and you have any questions about the video, you can contact me on LinkedIn, or you can send us an email at info@cybervigilance.uk. And in this Techie Tuesdays, we're going to be looking at the application management risk, or risk analysis on the SentinelOne management console. So there's been recently a new update to the management console in SentinelOne for application management, which includes risks and also like inventory metrics. So we're going to do a quick look at that today. And if you have any questions, just let me know. I can bring the chat up at any second and answer the questions. So yeah, we'll give it just another minute. Let's see if I can get the chat up on my phone so I don't have to switch. There we go. All right, that should be all working. I want to get straight into this Techie Tuesdays now. So yeah, if you're watching on pre-recorded or you've just joined through LinkedIn, let me know. And yeah. All right, so we're going to start now. So SentinelOne has recently introduced a new feature called application management. They basically did an entire overhaul of their legacy application vulnerability system that they had, which would effectively group, it was quite like an abstract basic form of like just CVEs based on CVEs on applications, and there wasn't a whole lot of information behind it. It was simply just a link to the MITRE website, and then the NIST website as well. And it didn't say whether it was like a POC or, I mean, it said the vulnerability like CVE scale, but it didn't necessarily tell you the full extent of how it would potentially ruin your system or be exploited. So this is where SentinelOne have come through with a new update where they have a much more advanced, more digestible system as well, because it helps you take in more information from specific areas and develop it into your own use cases. So what we do is that this is currently on my test environment. I'm going to close down this scope and just show you all of the risks that we have here. So I'll show you one that I have stuff installed on. Let's so before we start filtering out the different CVEs and vulnerabilities, I just want to bring your attention to the filters tab. So if you want to filter your CVEs, you can do it by CVE ID, application, endpoint name, vendor, domain, and that's simply the free text search. You can also filter by site. However, there's not group on here. I think you might have to add that yourself. But it seems to be like a site-wide thing rather than a group-based feature. Oops. Exploit code maturity. So this is basically whether there's. Let's have a quick look. Let's have a quick dive in. So let's have a look. Google Chrome 101, and I'm going a bit too far ahead. So exploit code maturity is basically if the code is being, or the exploit code is being used consistently, not necessarily in the wild per se, but there's like proof of concept for it. Or if it's simply a theoretical CVE, because those sometimes exist. But say if there was like a repo on GitHub that, I know there was a recent one with an Intel driver. I don't know if it was 23 CVE, it was 22. But it basically gave kernel access to anyone that had the, if you were to exploit it, it would give kernel access to anyone who exploited the Intel drivers, to identify the driver and then sent it the information that it needed to become an exploit. So the remediation level, this is whether there's an official fix or not, or it's undefined, or there's a temporary fix, or there's a workaround, or the remediation is just completely unavailable. And then the report confidence, most of them are going to be confirmed. Like MITRE and NIST are quite strict with their CVEs, so most of them will end up being confirmed anyway. And exploited in the wild, this is if certain threat groups or high-skilled / low-skilled hackers are using this in the wild, and it's been documented in that way. You can also filter by OS, your endpoint type as well. So you've even got Kubernetes and storage units as well, which I think is great. And also you've got server as well, so you can do actual servers like on-prem servers or like AWS or Azure and stuff. You can see whether it succeeded in the last scan result. You can filter by like a sort of a slider or vulnerability score, and you can see how many days it is from the CVE detection. So the CVE detection date as well, and when the CVE was published as well. And what we'll do, we'll leave that just for now, and I'm actually going to bring your attention to this specific CVE. We'll close that down. So this CVE 2294. Let's have a quick look on the MITRE website. So it's heap buffer flow in the WebRTC in Google Chrome prior to this specific version. Allows remote attackers to potentially exploit heap corruption via a crafted HTML page. So simply opening up a HTML, the HTML page could give you pretty much an RCE at this point, depending on how your Chrome is virtualized or if it is or is not virtualized. So let's have a look at, so it'll basically be the same for NVD on NIST. So 8.8 and that's interesting. So I think so the NIST website says it's a base score of 8.8 and SentinelOne has said it's a 6, but that is because of the remediation levels. If you look at the vulnerability indicators, you can see, oh, it's associated with malware and it's exploited in the wild, so it could be a big risk. However, because there's an official fix released, the vulnerability score has gone down because it's possible to actually fix this rather than removing the entire application from the system. You can also see the scope of where this is in. So say if you had like a development group and they all had the same version of a vulnerable version of like .NET, you'd likely see a bunch of CVEs for this specific scope if you were to filter by it. You can also see the domain that it's in, but that's specifically to do with the endpoint details. Just quickly on the left, you can also see when it has been detected. It's based on full disk scans as well, because that's how they gather the inventory for the application management. And I'll bring your attention over to inventory in just a moment. So vulnerability score. Let's have a look at SentinelOne's base values, because this is not something that I had a look at. I think this is really interesting. So if we hover over the question mark, it says calculated based on SentinelOne's internal data and vulnerability intelligence feeds. So even if NIST were to rate it as an 8.8 on a CVE score, SentinelOne have lowered it due to what they have processed as internal data and vulnerability intelligence feeds. So the attack vector is over a network. So if you open up a HTML page and you connect to a domain, for instance, that would be the vector itself. The attack complexity is quite low. The privileges required are none, because you're simply just opening up a web document. The user interaction is required, but it's simply just opening it up. But if you were to look at like a CVE that was ranked as a score of 10, there'll be little to no user interaction, and that's why they're considered a 10, because simply being connected to the internet with that CVE, if it's over 9.5, then there's no user interaction, especially if it's over network. So that's something to think about. The scope hasn't changed. Confidentiality, integrity, availability. So that's based on the CIA triad. It doesn't say it affected very much, just on low. And on temporal values, it says exploit maturity. That's what we filtered by just now. And it says that there's an official fix, and the report confidence is confirmed. And it also gives you this red box saying it's exploited in the wild. So threat actors and some dodgy people in bunkers are trying to hack your systems, whether you have this. So it's important to keep your application vulnerability management up to date. Otherwise, you're probably going to get exploited at some point. And even if you trust your employees not to install certain things and all of that, like especially if you've got bring your own device, you need to be very, very careful and constantly monitor what applications they're installing. So you've got the CVE timeline. You can see that it was exploited in the wild and the mitigation was published at the same time. So this is likely because it was spotted, it was reported as it was being exploited at the same time. Some CVEs will be privately handed over by security researchers themselves before they're even exploited. Those are the good guys, and for the bad guys would be exploiting it first before they were caught. And as they're being caught exploiting it, security researchers will actually catch them instead, and they were able to publish the mitigation for it. And then they identify the vulnerability a day after. That's given the CVE score. If it's like a extremely disruptive CVE, they usually get given like a name. So a recent exploit is proxy not shell, or the Java exploit log4j. And then there's an advisory that's been published. The CVE was assigned on July 28th, and a public proof of concept was published on August 18th, 2022. So I actually want to see this before we get to the vulnerability indicators. Let's copy this. I want to see if we can find a proof of concept on GitHub somewhere. I wonder. Here we go. We've already found a proof of concept. So if anyone can set this up and start exploiting the CVE. It's public for anyone to use. Yeah, and that's this is how it works. I need to figure out how all of this is configured. Yeah, so it's a heap buffer overflow. So it looks like it's to do with what rendering looks like. See, I think that's quite interesting. It also shows you that it's not just Chrome, it's WebRTC itself specifically. But so that in the wild, it's specifically targeting Chrome. So that's something to keep an eye on. So have a look at vulnerability indicators. So SentinelOne has, actually let's open this up. So SentinelOne has said that it's associated with malware. It's exploited in the wild, so there's 2 high indicators. A medium threat based on how it's discussed in the Intel threat report. There is evidence of exploitability, as we've just seen in that proof of concept. Intrusion prevention rule is available. I'll have to look into that myself. Mentioned in a news article, so not just the good guys, but the bad guys who don't know about the exploit are going to start bringing their attention towards it, especially if there's a proof of concept. And then the proof of concept is published online. And then some of the lower sort of just informational things is that there's a certificate advisory published. Discussed on criminal location. It does not require user privileges. So very low complexity to exploit. I barely saw that many lines of code. Well, this is probably like not even 30 lines, maybe 40. There is a medium CVE score of 4 to 7. mitigating control is available. There's a patch available, and it's remotely exploitable. So I think that was a really interesting look and a quick overview into the risk side of application management. And just to finish off, we're going to go into the inventory, where this is where you can get the metrics of what applications you have installed. Also, if you go into actions, you can scan now and scan all of your endpoints for the applications and basically gain the metrics. So you'll see on, let's say for instance, Sentinel Agent, you'll see that if you click on them, you can see the endpoints that have Sentinel Agent installed. Let's have a look if we can filter by versions. You can also see the different versions of agents that we have installed in our NFR environment. Let's see if we can find something vulnerable. So, I want to see if we can find VLC player. Okay. Well, I'm not too sure about VLC player, but I know it was definitely a risk before. I think I rolled back that device, so it's not installed anymore. But yeah, you can see the number of endpoints that are installed with this specific application. You can see the number of versions. You can also see the vendor, and that's based on the signer identity. And you can also filter it similarly as you would do before with this based on vendor, site, OS, OS version, and these different types of architecture. And also you can do free text search. So I think that was a really good overview into application management. If you guys have any questions, let me know. You can send me a message on LinkedIn. I'll be sure to answer them. And you can also send us an email at info@cybervigilance.uk. If you would like a one-to-one demo with SentinelOne, also contact us on our email, and we can get something set up. So I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I will be closing off the Techie Tuesdays this week. So next week, I'll announce it on LinkedIn what we'll be doing, and I hope you guys enjoyed.